As we close out Module 3, I want to take some time to do a debrief on the module. The core content of the session centered around enrollment, custody, and parental rights, which are three areas with the most complex issues that PPWs have to face. My goal in this module was for you to gain a sense of the real-life scenarios that PPWs face on the job. Now, many of you shared in your learning logs how much you enjoyed the real-life application of the content, even if you found some of the events frustrating and feeling like you needed more information to make a clearer decision regarding the matter. Now, my hope is that you learn that often you'll need to gain more information and collaborate with others as you work through these issues, and that these types of enrollment and custody situations are hardly ever simple, but rather are layered with complexities that you must filter through and explain to those involved. Now, someone posted that it would be a good idea if I shared what I would have done in each scenario that I gave. So, here are some of my thoughts. With regard to the enrollment with the mother coming from Georgia, I would have not allowed enrollment until I'd gained more information from Georgia regarding what the situation was there. I would not initially consider her homeless. I'd have to gain more information on why she moved to Maryland with her mother. I would not need the parenting agreement to allow enrollment. The father would still have rights because there was no court document, taking away his parental rights. Now, in terms of the ID, I would contact a prior school and see if they had a picture of the parent in the child's file from when she enrolled him there. If not, I would not allow enrollment until she could be able to provide an ID. Now, if I would deem her homeless, I would allow her to enroll without an ID if the prior school could verify her as the mother. Now, in terms of the 16-year-old coming from out of state, I again would call the prior school to gain more information regarding the terms of the suspension and when it was to end. And if his suspension was up, I would allow the parent to enroll him in his home school, but I would not allow him to start until the beginning of the term. Most classes would be giving final exams, and it would not make sense to have the student be in a class he has not attended all semester. Now, related to the question of whether I would allow a relative who was on the emergency card to pick up a student from school for an appointment, I would not allow the person to take the child because a regular doctor's appointment is not an emergency. The parent would need to provide a note. Connected to the case involving 50-50 custody, I would not allow the stepmother to pick up the child because the mother is the primary decision maker until the end of the day when the father's custody starts according to their agreement. And then with the student who had been making self-harming statements, I would allow the emergency contact to take the child home. I would require a meeting with the parent, or at least advise the school to require a meeting with the parent as part of the child's return to school to address the school's concern over the child's statements and the fact that the school was not able to reach the parent. And lastly, the case involving the children from El Salvador. I would invite as few people as possible to the initial meeting to determine enrollment. because it can be overwhelming for the family. Remember, the first meeting is to determine only if you are going to allow enrollment. I would only invite the interpreter, the ESOL coordinator, and any other PPW who might be involved based on school placement options. And I would also be sure to ask that the students be present. Now, prior to the meeting, I would talk with the principal, the counselor, and the registrar of the schools involved regarding the pending enrollments and supports for the student within the school, especially if they were coming from traumatic events which could cause and affect them emotionally. And during the meeting, if needed, I would, and most of the time it is needed, I would contact the health department with the interpreter regarding immunizations, appointments that the students might need. Now, based on the reason that the parent came to the United States, I would deem the family as homeless and work with them to gather the needed documents for enrollment and community supports that they could use. In terms of school placements, I know that the standard practice is to place children in their age-appropriate grade. And I would be sure that I understood the duration of the school year from the country that the children came from. Now, in terms of the 6-year-old, I would advocate that the child be placed in kindergarten because the child seemed to have such little kindergarten experience with only 3 months of school. And also because the child is small in stature. It might be more appropriate for her to be with kindergarten students. The 16-year-old would need to be placed in high school. It would be inappropriate for a student of that age to be in middle school. Once the meeting, and then once the school placement is decided, I would contact the school regarding arrangements for an enrollment meeting. These are some of my general thoughts. I'm sure I missed a point or two, but in general, this is how I would approach each case. Now, as we start into Module 4, into our last module, we'll be focusing on topics related to homelessness, foster care, reportable offenses, kinship care, and residency issues. Now, we'll also touch on the interview process and review a rubric used within, at least within my county, which might be similar to the one that they use in your county to evaluate PPWs. So, because I want you to have a sense of these things as you move toward seeking a job or a position as a PPW. And so I hope you find this last module meaningful as you move from this class. And as your final task, you will be asked to create a narrated PowerPoint that touches on the essential duties and functions of a PPW. And I'll upload a PowerPoint regarding the assignment. And lastly, I've heard from some of you that the requirement of 3 learning logs per module is too much. So, for the last module, I want you to only do 1. I only want you to do 1 learning log. And I want you to do it at the end of the module. And I want you to give me a reflection on the entirety of the class. Give me honest feedback on the class and things that I could consider as I plan future classes. And so, with all that, if you get ready to start the last module, thank you for all your hard work through the last couple weeks, and just finish strong in the next 2 weeks. Certainly, if you have questions or concerns, you can always reach out, and I'll be sure to answer any questions that you might have. Okay, thanks. Enjoy your Sunday.